Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk about the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I know a lot of content creators kind of rushed to make it out before they even played ranked and got to the max rank themselves, but this is my personal opinion after playing ranked, and I wanted to make this video basically going over the best decks for specifically the highest rank of tier, which is the competitive ladder. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, I'm going to be using several different websites because I know people like other websites. This one that I just found about called Master Duel Meta is kind of cool because it tells you how much it's going to cost. A lot of people are kind of using this for a reference of how much does this deck cost to actually build. We'll actually use Ready for Duel as well. There's a lot of different OCG players in here as well. We'll also use Road of the King. A lot of these will be basically the same, but to really sum it up over here, a lot of people want to know what's the best deck to play. Honestly, if you are a brand new Yu-Gi-Oh player and you're just looking for a video of what the best deck is, that's relatively cheap as well. And I say relatively cheap because a lot of different decks will actually require you to get ultra rares that will be used in multiple different decks, and there are other variants of builds as well. Some of these are going to be from bigger tournaments as well. I know there hasn't been an official Konami tournament, but you'll see very similar deck lists. I'm not going to say this particular deck list is the best, but just in general, I would say Eldritch is one of the most powerful decks in the game, and the reason why is specifically because Skill Drain absolutely destroys this game. That card alone just dominates. I would put, if I was to put the best decks, number one in my personal opinion would probably be Eldritch for new players. The reason why, it's a very, very easy deck to learn. You literally flip up Skill Drain and your opponent will just quit. It's very hard to have lots of outs because a lot of people aren't really main decking lots of back row hate. Another great, fantastic deck though that can actually deal with it perhaps a little bit better is Sky Striker, as this is another deck that will kind of out-resource your opponent. So that's kind of the playstyle. I'll also briefly kind of talk about the playstyles of these decks over here, and some of these are going to be from tournaments. There are some other content creators hosting tournaments, and that's kind of what we have for a reference of best decks. But specifically with, let's say, the Eldritch, the playstyle is get this guy called the Golden Lord out, and then basically all of your spells and traps, for the most part, will recycle into more spells and traps. So you get to use one of them per turn, then you get to banish them, and then you get to sell another Eldelixir spell / trap directly from your deck. This deck has a huge weakness to turn 1 GGs, as in if someone has a Natria Beast or Barkion, or they can make both, this deck folds pretty hard to specifically that. But they have specifically Skill Drain that makes it so good. If they open up with this, it's very, very nasty to actually have to deal with. But it's more of a deck that is a slower pace deck. It's not an explosive combo deck. Sky Strikers is kind of in the same boat. It's kind of a deck that will out-resource your opponent. But it is a deck that I would say is a little bit more difficult to play for newer players because you have to know when to specifically use this card called Widow Anchor, and you have to recycle your engage. I'm not going to make this video like a tutorial on how to play the decks because I'm not going to try to keep this super long, but just keep in mind, look at this maybe as a reference because I know some players just want to build the deck for a certain price range, and these decks, a lot of them are going to be quite expensive. So I would say Eldritch and Sky Striker are pretty solid. Sky Striker, you do have to have a good amount of knowledge on Yu-Gi-Oh to actually play correctly though. So for beginners, I'd say Eldritch is probably your go-to, but Sky Strikers is a really good, I would say Sky Strikers and Drytron would be around the top 2 as well. Specifically with Drytron, they really need to excel at going first. The reason why is because if the deck goes second, it doesn't perform as well. If you make a Nat Beast, literally they can't make all their powerful monsters, so they're kind of stuck at not really making anything too good. I mean, they can maybe try to push for this, but for the most part, the deck could definitely fold to a Nat Beast. I mean, that card is just so powerful right now in Yu-Gi-Oh! Any Pendulum variant Sky Striker, they just lose to it. That's why I prioritize making it. But Drytron is a deck where your goal is to make this card called the Herald of Ultimateness and get as many free pluses off of Eva as well as the Cyber Angel Ben 10. This card is so overpowered. It's actually at 1 in the modern Yu-Gi-Oh game, but in Master Duel you have triple, and it's insane. Really, really good stuff indeed for this deck. Your goal is to make this card, and every single time that your opponent does anything, all you have to do is send a fairy type monster from your hand to the graveyard, and you get to negate that special summon activation and just destroy it. So your goal is to go first with this deck, make this card, and then have a bunch of cards in your hand or even to recycle, and you basically just say no to everything and then you win. That's the goal of this deck. Sky Strikers is more you got to play around your opponent. You use this card to add this card, send a card to the graveyard. It's a slower paced duel for sure. Zootry Brigades, I would consider this in the tier 3-ish over here. Same thing with like even like Virtual World. Virtual World, I would say falls a little bit short against certain matchups. Yes, you have the True King of all calamities, which I'll get into the playstyle of this deck. This deck is kind of like you make a bunch of powerful monsters, but specifically they have access to this card, which the other ones don't. This card, you make it and a lot of people will quit. It's called the True King of all calamities. It's actually banned in the modern Yu-Gi-Oh game for lots of reasons, but specifically because as a starting, like when your opponent starts, you just go quick effect, and then I'm going to activate this effect. Now everything is going to become whatever attribute I declare, and I negate all of those up on the board. It's a really nasty card, and on top of that, they become that attribute, and in their possessions can activate their effects or attacks. So basically your opponent can't attack you or activate any effects, and this card only has to detach one material, and you're gonna have 2 for it. And basically it says your opponent cannot play for the turn. But I think that like just in general, the Tri Brigade variant can be a little bit better depending on what you are playing. There's Tri Brigade and Tri Brigade Lyricalus, and there's also Zodiac Tri Brigade. I'm gonna kind of lump them all into like kind of one over here. There is lots of different builds that use the Tri Brigade. The reason why the Tri Brigade deck is very powerful, specifically because they have kind of 2 options. They can go for Mist Valley Apex Avian. This is a special summon heavy deck, by the way. It's just special summon, or you call it Bird Up. There's lots of different names for variants of the deck. But the goal of most of these is try to make a very powerful turn 1 board, and depending on the build that you play, you can actually bust out a card where it makes so they can only special summon wind monsters. Alternatively, if you want to, because again, Eldritch is so dang popular, they've opted mostly, I would say, to go for this card in the more recent times, and that is because Apex Avian has this effect where, as a quick effect, you get to bounce itself back, and then you get to stop whatever, and then you can maybe re-special summon it again. But it is a deck where both these decks would definitely lose to Max C, because like they end up drawing so many cards that you'll have an out to whatever they have. Because a lot of stuff you'll notice, like even right now in Eldritch, some of them are playing Torrential Tribute. That's a really big card, and if you're going for these big plays, a lot of them end up with like lots of monster negates versus omni negates in Tri Brigade Lurloose. That's why I find it to be a little bit short. That's why I'm considering Drytrons on like the tier 2 versus this is like on the tier 3-ish side. It's still a good deck, and you can still get platinum, by the way, with any of these decks that I'm talking about. It's just that like you're gonna have maybe more success in terms of like, in my personal opinion, because I mean the top 5 is always going to be anyone's opinion on it, but I want to also kind of use some tournaments, and like, I mean, most people would agree that these are like the top decks. I don't think that's really up for debate. Virtual World is kind of in the same boat. Like you can make some really powerful boards. You can get Crystal Wing, then you get Ultimate Token, set a card, but it's specifically like what makes this deck good is the True King, and the True King against a slower paced deck that may not need to special summon a lot of monsters or get their monsters effects immediately. That's why I feel like this deck kind of falls short to perhaps some of like the Tri Brigade variants. It's just because the options of like if you play against this deck, they will just will go for this card every single time, and as long as you can stop this card without a droplet or just like a chalice, sometimes like they just force this card so hard that that's all they do. So like that's why I feel like this deck falls a little short. By the way, if you're looking to play competitive, I would not actually recommend at this moment to play Nibiru at all, because of Sky Striker, Eldritch being like the most popular decks. So like this would be like where I consider like number 1. I would say like these are great number 2s, and then like 3s over here, maybe like 4s about if that's what we're kind of looking at. But in terms of 5, lots of any variants of using the Phantom Knight engine. If you guys are looking for more of a budget deck, as like I would consider this in like, keep in mind when I say like tier 5, like the top 5, it's still really good. It's just that like in my personal opinion, one might just be a little bit better than the other. This is a really great cheap deck, because if you look at the ultra rares, all you need realistically to make the deck really good is the Rusty Bardiche. This by the way is used from Ready for Duel. I'm using lots of different websites as references kind of, but pretty much you'll see some of the same cards again and again. Like I said, I don't even recommend Nibiru. My deck will play around it like no problem. In fact, my deck, I'm not even including my deck on this top list because I think it's really difficult to play. And like I'm assuming most people are like beginners and want to like know kind of how the deck works, and that's what I'm trying to explain. So Phantom Knights is a deck that it's kind of a grind game deck. It's definitely oriented around like you can go off pretty hard, and if you get like access, like that card's really good for like finishing off games, but it's going to be a slower paced deck. But you will set up lots of cards called Fog Blades, and they will be excellent for specifically making it so your opponents don't have effects. But again, like because Eldritch is so popular and like skill drain, once that's thrown out, it's like it's kind of rough for this deck. I'm gonna be honest. Like you can have these other cosmic cards, but like you're not OTKing very, very, very fast. You can try other builds. Like this one has a Speedroid. and you could try to push a little bit more, but for the most part, it's not a deck that you'll consistently OTK super often, unless you play the danger variant, which is what you're seeing up on screen. I like the danger variant more because you can push harder, and I think that you got to be very fast in Yu-Gi-Oh! You cannot give your opponent like an extra turn, because sometimes a lot of decks, they're just one card away from just beating you the next turn. So I would recommend looking at this for a cheaper deck, but with the dangers, yeah, like they're all like super rares, which is nice. Well, there are technically ones that are ultras, but you don't really need those ones. Like the most important ones are going to be Jack, and then obviously you got the Snake. And then also there's different variants of some of the stuff we've already seen. Like I said, Virtual Ward over here. I'm just kind of using this as a reference so you guys can kind of see some other cards. One thing I want to mention is there are still people that play Effect Failures, so you do have to look out. If you're playing Crossout, which I wouldn't recommend newer players to buy into, because if you're going to get Crossout, you got to get Ash Blossom, you got to get Maxi, you got to get Imperm, you got to get Veiler into your deck. And if you draw, and you're only playing like one copy of each, and you draw that, and then your opponent Veilers you, can be like, oh, well, Crossout. Call by the Grave is just a much better card overall. And this one, again, another OCG top deck over here. Another Tri Brigade variant. This one's a Zootry Brigade. So yeah, Zootry Brigade versus the other ones, they'll get a Trident turn 1, like pretty much 100% of the time. They will specifically go for AA Zeus. AA Zeus is a really good card. I kind of want to actually go back to this because it's actually so important for, especially mentioning what it does. So you're going to try to prioritize making this in any of the variants of Zootry Brigade specifically, but other decks can make it too. It just is able to, if you attack over a monster, or if you just can just make it. How it works is you get to have usually you'll have at least 2 materials with it. In Zodiacs you've got tons, but once per turn, if Exceeds monster battled this turn, you can Exceed summon this card by using one Exceed monster you control, and you transfer all the materials to that card. The quick effect is what you want. You detach 2 materials from this card, you send all other cards on the field to the graveyard. Once per turn, if another card you control is destroyed by battle of an opponent's card effect, you attach 1 card from your hand, deck, or extra deck to this card as material. So it's fantastic for that. This deck can actually bust out this card multiple times. You can like reset it with Avarice, but this is like kind of like your star player. It's like a 3,000, and it like sends. It doesn't destroy, so it gets around a lot of mechanics in the game. But this deck, you can try to push with this deck relatively fast too. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that as a heads up. I think, yeah, we were just talking about this, and I just wanted to show you guys Zeus. This one over here is the invoked variants. There's even Shadals are great. I consider Shadals in like a top 5 as well. I know this this video is way longer than necessary at this point, but I just wanted to like give a shout out to other decks that like you can consider if maybe something didn't really pique your interest. This one's more of a kind of a control deck, so it reacts on summoning hand traps basically on your opponent's turn, and then you can like either pop a card. But the Dogmatica variants of invoked or invoked Shadals, you're gonna be making this card called Macabre, and then it can you use 1 card in your hand to respond to your opponent to negate their card. So if they use a spell, if you want to negate, you got to use a spell too. But this whole deck is pretty decent. It's been like really good. Like the whole joke in Yu-Gi-Oh community is normal summon Alistair so many years later. This deck is still just like alive. It's kind of like a fusion deck. So if you like fusions, I mean, you really only make Macabre 99% of the games anyways. You'll make this other super rare, but for the most part, it is a very control-oriented deck where you're able to like pop stuff, and then you summon Macabre, and then you can boost up Macabre by 1,000. It's a relatively controlled deck. It's not like a very explosive deck. It's kind of more reactive on your opponent. Another variant of Eldritch, we got Rivalry and goes in at triple. Got Ice Dragon Prison. I actually really like Lava Golem. I think that's one of the best cards, honestly. And Skill Drain, you can even throw in Torrentials. There's a lot of things that you can throw in, because against Eldritch, a lot of players will overcommit when they're like, oh, he's only got 1 trap. It's my moment now, and you get Torrential. I think Torrential's not a bad card at all at this format if you're playing Eldritch. Keep that in mind as well. Here's another like website, Road to the King. You'll see a lot of other variants, the same decks that we're mentioning. I'm just showing you guys other tech cards. This one card called Reasoning lets you send a bunch of cards. Lets you, yeah, this one's playing Torrential. I like this. This build's looking pretty good. It's got the Gozen. That could be very, very powerful as well. Or actually, this might be, yeah, this one's Gozen. Revelry and Gozen, they're kind of like, one does one thing, one does the other. But the other guy max on both. This guy's got massive amounts of draw power, triple Lava Golem. This guy's definitely going for like the just in case my opponent makes an Atreya Beast and gonna wombo combo me, which I do to this deck all the time. But this deck is definitely one of the strongest. And here's another another variant of Drytron. You can see this one's running double. So Drytron, Literally Loose, they definitely are two decks that like have to go first. Whereas like the Eldritch, you can go second, or Sky Striker, you can go second. Virtual, you gotta go first as well. This is a variant of Literally Loose. This is like basically Zootry Brigade Literally Loose. It's basically just spam a bunch of birds up on the board, and then you get to make like F-Zero, and he can negate an effect, and then you get this card that has a bunch of attachments. It's a big bird, and he just keeps on detaching again and again. That's kind of how this one works. But it's similar in the fact of the other Zootry Brigade. Like you got Fractor, Triple, and the Vol. Like the deck is pretty strong at the moment as well. And it's just another Zootry Brigade Literally Loose variant. And like I said, I'll link one copy of each of the the sources over here because I want to give them credit. But in particular, I don't know if there's any websites, because obviously Master Duels came out. Let me know if there's any other good websites that you guys are using to like kind of track some of the best decks in the game. But in terms of my list, that's basically my top 5 plus. I mentioned some of the other decks as well over here, just in case you guys wanted a little bit extra. But I would say I like this website specifically because of this. Like, it shows you how much like some of these decks cost, and they're all going to be relatively expensive. We're all looking at like 600 plus. Like, if you're looking for a really budget deck, I would probably look into the Phantom Knights, as they're going to be like one of the cheapest decks, because it doesn't require that many URs. You don't need Nibiru. In fact, I don't recommend Nibiru. You don't even need like Imperial Order, but like those are cards you can play in like a lot of different things. But you definitely want, like, let's say Rhoda would be like the only card that maybe it might be used in like just this deck. Well, you can use it in Heroes too, but you could also consider Rusty Bardiche. Okay, other than that though, most of the stuff can be used in lots of other decks. But anyways, that's going to go and wrap up the video. You guys can let me know your thoughts of what you think is the top 5 decks, but those are the top 5 plus decks in my opinion. But thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here, hit subscribe, turn on the bell if you want to see more Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel content. Take care. I'll catch you next one. Peace.